Today we're going to be picking up where we left off last time. We had figured out what that bug was that was plaguing our silver zone. If you recall, it was just a namespace issue. Kind of ridiculous that I hadn't found that earlier, but c'est la vie, right? So if we look at our jobs, we can jump in and we can see what's been happening lately. So it looks like this one is failing in silver still. So let's go down. So this stopped. Okay. So let's go over into silver. So we had let this run before I had to log off, so we hadn't gotten a chance to see whether it had worked or not. So if we go ahead and start up our cluster and walk through this, yeah, you can see this is the last thing I left running before I had to log off. So let's look at this. So the stream stopped, so that's fine. Schema mismatch on this table. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and turn on merge schema to be true in this case. So we can see, oh, this should be going into toasts, not toast fact. So glad that got caught. Okay, so that should make it easy. And then let's make sure that there's still a toast fact. There we go. Perfect. Okay. And then let's see what this... There was a delta issue in the middle. We're trying to trade. Schema's not specified. Okay. I think this was an order of operations thing, so we'll get that figured out. Happy to take this out, and then I think we brought comments back. But that string not callable issue, that was a long time coming. Happy to finally remove that. Okay, so we can take this out as well. And then once our cluster runs, we're ready to go. Then I'm going to go ahead and get Power BI fired up here. Should be under recent. There we go. One of the things I wanted to play around with here, because I did go ahead and update to the latest version of Power BI, I wanted to try out, there's a new Parquet connector. And let's keep an eye on this. Where did Power BI go? maybe that's in a coming release. Let's look. Oh, I think this is what we need to do. Okay. So if we went in here, it's just that it supports Parquet files. It's not a specific connector. So we still want to use the ADLS Gen 2 connector. Saw today, I think it was the IPO day for Snowflake. They were on MSNBC in the lobby of my building. And then I think we can give the URL here. I've already got my Mixer workspace open, so I'll just bounce over. And then it's under configuration. Maybe it's under maybe it just wants an account name. Maybe it's that easy. I haven't set this up before. It should be pretty straightforward. So if we go to, we have to provide some access. It looks like we could do it through data flow. So if you remember, we don't actually have a data flow yet for this Mixer stuff. So I'm gonna have to connect directly to it, but I still am interested in getting that set up at some point. Okay, so it's gonna be this. So we can Mixer demo lake, and then the file system name. What do we call that? Default, I think. That would be /silver. Actually, we should probably use an account key, but I'm going to go ahead and sign in. Let's see, it seems to like us. Gotcha. Okay, so let's see. Make sure that container is named the right thing. And this is sort of a red herring, but I'm curious. So it's default. And then we called it query, not silver. Okay, let's just try default then. We can go from there. And as always, let me know in the chat if this is the kind of stuff that's relevant to what you're doing. If you want me to just focus on Databricks. I'm basically using Power BI as a mechanism to explore the query zone of the data lake so that we can figure out what we want to do with the gold zone. We could do that in Databricks. That's one of the things that I'm kind of looking forward to, some of the new data tools that they're bringing in to do, but they're not available yet. If you caught, I think it was the July Databricks user group session, we talked quite a bit about that new acquisition. Let's see if this is going to work. I think the fact that it's timing out is a good sign, not a bad sign. It'd probably help if I had my camera on too. Man. It's a good thing my head is attached to my body. Okay. I don't think that's coming across. I'm just noticing my video still isn't coming across on YouTube. There we go. Perfect. I forget that it's a little behind. So all these JSONs are not what we want to bring in. So what we can do is just add that query zone instead. If we were so inclined. Well, let's go ahead and just keep our default connector. That was just something to explore while the silver zone ran through. We'll play around with that later. So this worked end to end. So I think we're good there. Perfect. So what we can do is actually go into transform. And I'm going to make sure we're bringing in all of our tables here. So comments. So let's refresh. Yep, so now comments is going to be this. Do we still not have, oh, we're not doing user, so I'm going to remove that for now. But fact beer is in there. While that runs, I'm going to kick up some jams. There we go. Perfect. Okay. Let's close and apply this, and then let's look at our data model. Get out of the way, iTunes. Perfect. So let's take a look at the data model. Sorry, the data model. So we now should be able to do a one-to-one relationship here. So interesting. Okay, so So we still have many to many, which makes sense. This should be unique though, because yeah, that should all have the same ABV. So let's make sure. I'm going to add this as a to-do in the lake, but we'll go ahead and do it in Power BI for now. So what we can do over in our transform step is just go ahead and remove duplicates. Let's refresh this. Because it makes sense that the fact table is going to have duplicates, because that's a lookup table to check-in IDs, and there are plenty of things that I've had more than once. So that makes sense. But like you can see here, these should be deduped. So let's go ahead and do that. Like these top two rows should have been deduped. So we can, under transform, why am I not seeing it? There we go. Okay, cool. So let's apply this. And we'll do the same thing with breweries as well. Perfect, and then we'll do the same thing with brewery, just in case. And some of this is probably due to dirty ingestion, but oh well. We can fix it regardless. That's being a little overzealous. There we go. Same thing with venues. Okay, let's apply this and we'll see where we're at. It's thinking. Okay, so then the next thing is this. Let's try again. Cool. So we got our many to one, and then we'll delete this. So this should be 1-to-1 with check-in ID, and then this can be many to one with beer. So we're looking good there. The cat just tried to get up on the standing desk, and the cat cannot. Poor guy. Okay, and then we also want brewery ID. So then venues, did we bring in a fact table for venues? Yep, there is a fact venue. Remove all this stuff. Hey, yeah, Joe, am I pronouncing that right? Go ahead and post your question in chat and I'll address it. Whoa, that is not what you want to see. Let's clear all these. Just delete that. That auto detect relationships can be really annoying. I didn't think I had it checked, but apparently. Okay. Yeah. So JSON batch file URL/data. So you've got a bunch of JSON blobs that you want to ingest into Databricks Delta. Is that the idea? So for that, essentially, that's what we're doing in the silver zone. So if you looked at, for instance, and I'm going to derail for a second because that's a good question. If you look at what we're doing in these notebooks, which I want to make sure I go ahead and save here. What you'll see is that this raw up here is reading in from a delta table that's sourced from the untapped raw path, right? But the way that we had it configured in the past was actually if you look at our bronze, and you might want to go back and look at some of the earlier revisions in the Git repo, that's essentially what we're doing here. Is we're loading data in from an API into a data frame, and then in this step, we're loading the JSON into that raw path. And then what we're doing in this next step is ingesting it and writing it out into Delta. So if you were to look back at some of these earlier revisions of silver and gold from, say, July or August, you would actually see that process end to end. And feel free to reach out to me via email or this channel, and we can make sure you get set straight in terms of which streams to watch. But that's something that we covered earlier in some of these sessions. So great question. And then I guess the only other thing, you'll see once you start diving into that, getting it ingested is just one aspect of this problem. Getting the JSON flattened and enforcing a schema on top of it is kind of where the tricky part comes in. So we've got lots of content around that too, though. Okay, so we're going to make sure this got deduped as well, because it's not behaving like it did. Because we're still not getting that one-to-one relationship between venue ID and parent ID. Oh, and one other thing, Joe, we this month, I think it's Tuesday the 29th, last Tuesday of the month. Yeah, Tuesday the 29th is our Valorum Databricks user group, and we're actually accepting topics like suggestions for this session this month. So feel free to throw that on the pile. If you post on my LinkedIn post from today about this stream, that should get the question in the queue. Okay, so some of these are showing up as two types of venues. Okay, so what we want to do in this case is, let's think about this. So probably what we need to do is create a lookup table for venue type. And that's something that we can do in probably the gold zone. So if I'm taking these notes in the silver, but they're really for gold. Okay, and so then in this case, we'll just duplicate this again. We'll just make a venue type table. And what we're going to do is we're going to do some of this intermediate logic in Power BI, and then once we see the type of logic we want to create, we're going to go ahead and move it over into the gold zone. So we can have these categories, and then the category ID, category count, category key, category name, and then is primary. And we will remove all the other columns. Okay, and then that looks good. And then for venues, we'll remove those. So we'll remove, did we get parent category ID? We probably wanted that here. Let's make sure we keep that. Okay, so now I'm just going to remove, basically just do the opposite of what we just did. Just remove all these categories, because it's what's making it so that we can't do duplicate. So I'll just remove these. And so right now we have 83 rows, so we should be able to drop that down. Let's see. Rogue should be a good example here. Okay, perfect. So now if we apply these changes, one nice thing about doing it straight off the data lake is that the cluster won't need to be spun up, but well, like I said, do that later. So now let's take this fact venue, and then we should be able to relate these two in a one-to-many. Perfect. And then we can relate this on check-in ID. Look at that. Our snowflake is looking beautiful. And now we've got 20 minutes left to do some fun stuff. So great. Okay. So this, this big map view is more exploratory than anything. We were kind of playing around with what we could do with it. And like we created some measures for like the log of check-in count size and some stuff like that. Let's sort of walk back through what we did here. So our location, we're using the state lookup, and then we're using the latitude and longitude to get precise with it. So let's go ahead and take some of these off. Because I think we broke our visualization here. Okay. So that's working well. So that's coming from our brewery. And so if we look, one of the things that we just accomplished is now from brewery, we can go through facts and get, lookups for check-in ID, beer type, venue, all that other stuff. So let's go ahead and add in a size. So if we go off our main fact table, we should be able to use check-in ID Yeah. Okay, and you can see Kansas City is huge here. This is why we did that log count. We might come back to that, play around with it later. And then we can add in our latitude and longitude. And that gets a little bit more specific. And then what we had talked about doing is, so in the legend, we can have active. We can also have type. So that makes it a little bit busy, but it's kind of cool. You can see the type of brewery it is. And then for tooltips, we can do some cool stuff. Like we can have the name. We could also have the label. So if I mouse over this, I could see like alma mater. It's not great because you can only see one of the names. That's why we included this card over here. So if we take those out, so maybe what we do is later have more lookup information about, you know, that specific state, something like that. But, you know, if I click in on Kansas City, it's going to filter me down here. And it treats each of these as little slivers. So like I can see, I'm mostly going to microbreweries in Kansas City, you know, not to brag. But it's cool. You get these little cards, and then we can do the opposite too. So if I click off of that and click on alma mater, it should let me click in there. Maybe we turn this into a matrix. And instead of having the label, I think we want the name to be the rows. Or maybe we do, maybe we use our little hierarchy here for the row. And then for the columns, we can have the name and then the yeah. Yeah, that's going to be a little odd. I think I prefer the cards, even though you can't do proper click-throughs. We can play around with that. And then yeah. And then if you were to click on, you know, Boulder or one of these icons, it would drill you through. We'll play around with that. Because ultimately we want this to be kind of a lookup table version of the table on the left, or of the map on the left. Well, let's go ahead and undo that for now. And then one of the things that we want to do is start thinking about what kind of information we want to aggregate. So maybe we make this breweries at a high level. And I guess I have to do one more undo step. Give me my cards back. Come on. Okay, there we go. Okay. And then, like I said, maybe we make this a table. Yeah, I think that's what I want. And then we can, sort by name. Maybe we include a little search box. We'll play around with some of that. One of these days, maybe I'll see if we could get a designer to hang out with us for an hour and start poking around in here. Yeah, I thought there was a way to search it. Maybe it's just with this filter icon. Oh well, we'll play around with that. But yeah, I'm happy with this as like a brewery page for now. And then maybe one of the things that we do is include some just quick KPIs. So we can take, and we can play around with the formatting later, like I said, but we can kind of take this and move it down, give ourselves some room. Yeah, there we go. And then up here we can start doing some stuff with KPIs, like bringing in total breweries. It's down here. Yeah, little things like that. And the big thing with this exercise is trying to figure out what we need to model in Databricks, right? So like that example of venues was perfect. This kind of stuff where we're doing KPIs doesn't work as well. We might push that into a sanction layer at some point, but it's not ideal for this kind of reporting. So it's tough. Maybe we call this total breweries instead. And then turn this into a multi-card. Cool. And then we could also bring in from Brewery Fact just as an example. But then, we can bring in stuff like different cities or states. We can play around with that. But then if we went ahead and did something like with type, and here we do brewery ID, because we don't want to count the number of single visits. We kind of want to count the totals, and let's show the difference between what those two would look like. Let me grab my LinkedIn real quick for the chat. Excuse me. So if we change this duplicated one over to be this ID instead of the brewery ID, you'll see that this is the number of unique visits. This is the number of total visits. So it looks like I tend to do repeat visits to microbrews, right? So that can be valuable information. And then similarly, if we make another, and we had this be, let's see what label was up to. Oh, that's the, yeah, okay. And then if we did active, they should all be 100% active. Yeah. Okay, and then what was the only other one? So we already did type, so we could also do something, you know, with like state. And naturally you can see, you know, Missouri is the biggest repeat. And then similarly, if we brought in uniques with this brewery ID. Yeah, so that's the idea. So we'll play around with that a little more. I'm also going to real quick do the same thing for venues. So if we go ahead and change just a couple of these metrics over. So you'll see a lot of these things are the same. So we can do venue ID, and that's going to be unique venues. And then if we do the venue or the fact venue, that's going to be including repeats. And then similarly, with the types, we can do this venue type, and so we could bring in the primary category. If my drag and drop will work. Yeah, and then similarly, we could bring in the secondary category. Come on. Oh, I thought there was a, maybe it's category name. Yeah. And then for this one, we definitely want to include venue ID instead of beer ID or check-in ID. But yeah, that's sort of the idea. Yeah, and you can see a lot of these are breweries, some bars, some brew pubs. But yeah, that's the idea. So we're just going to keep modeling this stuff. Some of it we'll take back to the gold zone, but then I think we'll have a nice little report. And then, we'll start pursuing some other things. I really got some ideas for structured streaming, ML flow, etc. So as always, drop some comments in the chat. Let me know what you want to see next. But this is great stuff. I'm excited to see where this goes next. So thanks for tuning in. I'll catch you next week.